Instead of sitting down and me just chatting with you today, I figured we could try something a little bit different. I'm going to do some gentle yoga while I chat with you about emotional regulation and yoga together. And this is an invitation for you. You can follow along with me and copy what I'm doing. You can go for a little walk, fold some laundry, just sit and listen, have a stimming moment while you're watching. Whatever suits you best today, go with that. And yeah, let's move and let's chat about emotional regulation. Hi there, I'm Jade and welcome to Neuro Nurture Yoga. Today we're going to be having a move and chat practice as I chat with you about yoga and emotional regulation. I've got my handy dandy notes with me so not too many tangents happen. This is an invitation for you. Pick a movement if it feels good for you today, or if you're needing some rest, get cozy in a blanket, grab a pet, grab a stuffy, whatever you need to get cozy, relax, or take some movement, whatever you need. All right, so to start off, I figured I would just start with why I wanted to make this video. So, oftentimes, obviously, in the neurodivergent space, we talk a lot about emotional regulation and so many different things surrounding that topic. And because yoga has been such a beneficial tool for me with my neurodivergency, I figured it would be a good space to talk about yoga, my personal experiences, and even dive a little bit into the actual some yogic philosophy. I'm not really gonna go very in depth with it. Of course, if that's something you're looking for, I would happily do that. I'm just gonna do a light brush on these different types of things. So I'm gonna be fairly broad with how I'm relating emotional regulation to yoga. So I think that with our world and how we're taught to be humans, we're always so taught that emotional regulation, or emotions, especially the very strong and very seen as more powerful ones, like your anger, your jealousy, your frustration, all of these things, they're given such a bad reputation because obviously sometimes these emotions can make us do certain things that in our more balanced states we wouldn't do, and we're acting through emotion. And so it makes sense why us as a society has gotten that perspective, right? However, I think it's so important to acknowledge how necessary these emotions are, and that they're here as a messenger. They're here trying to tell us something. And if we constantly are pushing away these messages that these emotions are trying to teach us, of course we're going to continually see burnout over and over. And that, in my opinion, is a partial player in that, that burnout, because we're denying ourselves the ability to express these and feel these emotions. So we're in this space in our society where we must control these emotions. And however, I think we have it wrong, because it's not that we have to control the emotions, we have to control more so how we react to those emotions. And if we constantly are pushing them away and trying to get rid of them, it's just going to make it harder to really acknowledge what those emotions are and to actually be able to deal with them in a healthy way. And of course, like, that's a lot of my experience as a neurodivergent person, particular being a person who is highly emotional, and I've always had very strong emotions, which have gotten me into trouble at times. And they're not always received in ways that make sense to the people around me, that make sense to me. And that, again, it comes a lot from that aspect of trying to push them away and then having them build up to an extent, and then all of these emotions are like bubbling out, and it doesn't come out in a good way because I'm reacting versus processing and figuring out what actually is going on for me. I think a perspective shift on having emotions. If you're doing any type of movement, maybe checking in with your breath. What's your breath doing? Now, going to where yoga fits in with all of this. It's so much more than about just emotional regulation. It's supporting our nervous system and knowing when we can support our nervous system and noticing the signals when it's time to support our nervous system. And yoga is so helpful at creating that skill within ourselves of interoceptivity. I always trip out on that word, but I got it. So, like, knowing what's going on in our inner world. And don't get me wrong, this is still something I struggle with immensely, knowing what's happening. Yoga has been so helpful at helping me create that skill of starting to notice what's going on in my inner world and creating that space, that reactivity space. Medication has been very helpful for that with myself, but also building and creating that skill through yoga of noticing that space, so I have that moment to choose how I react. Of course, I'm not perfect. I still react a lot, but I've gotten a heck of a lot better since I have been practicing yoga. Body awareness, it can have a grounding effect, obviously, depending on the person. It helps me build that skill to ground because I don't feel grounded a lot of the time. So lots of different skills, whether it's the poses, whether it is a meditation, whether it's any of these more physical components of yoga, have been very helpful at creating a skill to ground myself. Of course, not always perfect, but I try my best and it gets better all the time. And then obviously some other things, creating self-compassion, it just acknowledging and accepting yourself for where you're at, because yoga is a humbler and it is here to show you that you're on a journey versus seeking a destination, which that doesn't always come right away when you're practicing. That's more of a learned lesson that, yeah, this is a journey and it doesn't have one specific destination. It is a space for you to be, to process, to notice. And within yoga, there is what's called the nadis. And nadis essentially are pathways, energy pathways that we have in our bodies. And there's thousands of them. However, there is like 3 kind of main channels that we have kind of going up and down our body, and then one going in the middle, and then that's our like main energy column in ourselves. And if you're looking at yoga and what we're doing with yoga, it is to help balance ourselves energetically, mentally, physically. It has so many different layers to how it is going to help us regulate. And these nadis, if you look at our nervous system, we have our whole nervous system that literally runs throughout our whole body. So essentially you can relate the two, right? You have your energetic lines, your nadis that I was talking about, and then your nervous system, which is literally your wiring throughout your body, sending signals all over the place. And what yoga helps to do is to create a balanced state within your nervous system. And it also helps you to build that skill to activate that nervous system when you need to through different practices. Example, breathing or asana, your poses can be very regulating. When we create that balance in our nervous system, create that skill, it helps to give us a more centered state, a more grounded state, a more emotionally regulated state. And when those high emotions do arise, it gives you the tools to be able to work with whatever sensation is happening, with whatever you got going on for yourself. And another thing that I think doesn't really get talked about a whole heck of a lot is the repetition, because oftentimes in yoga spaces, yoga classes, there's some type of repetition happening with something. So sometimes you'll do something multiple times, sometimes you'll do a breath pattern certain times in a repetitive fashion, and that specifically can have a really soothing effect on your nervous system. And same thing with chanting as well. That chanting actually activates part of your vagal nervous system to help create that sympathetic response in your body. Parasympathetic response, the chill one. So when you're in a rest and digest, so you have your parasympathetic and then your sympathetic. Your sympathetic is going to be when you're in your heightened state. Parasympathetic is your rest and digest, so when you're in a relaxed state. And I think that also something that gets a little bit of a misconception is always striving for that rest and digest state, that parasympathetic state, because ultimately we need both states. We need to be able to have an active nervous system, say when we're driving our car or when we are in a very busy place, making sure that we don't get hit by a car if you're walking across the street. The last point that I want to make is that yoga as like a philosophy can give a very structured way of living, of doing things in your life. And if that's something that feels good to you in your neurodivergent world, if you need a bit more structure, then yoga can be very powerful to create that structure for you and to create a way of living. So there's the yamas and niyamas if we're talking about the eightfold path. And those are essentially moral codes and personal codes that you can live by to make your life have certain steps and certain ways of living. So We have ahimsa, which is the practice of non-violence. So just being not a violent person, and having that moral and personal code for yourself and how you're going to show up with the world, which again can be very helpful for folks who are looking for guidance in how they want to live their life. For myself, I've obviously been talking a lot about my experience, but it really has been paramount into helping me understand myself on a deeper level and learning to slow down enough to understand myself. I used to always be really pushing, just through the ebbs and flows of life, trying to survive each day, really. And yoga has created that space for myself to acknowledge that and be with myself so I can understand my own body sensations, so I can understand my own thought patterns as well. Meditation has been paramount for that, just noticing how my brain does stuff and what's going on in there, just being with that. And it's very interesting because my practice definitely waxes and wanes in, my brain's saying intensity, but it's not even intensity. The amount that I'm doing, say, like poses and asanas, yoga is always with me, but my practice is always changing. Sometimes I'm not doing a lot of physical movement. Sometimes it's more just focusing on my meditation and noticing what is going on in my internal world, because sometimes that's what I need. I need to take that time to check in and to slow down, and that requires no movement and just sitting and being with myself. Overall, yoga has just been such a major tool for myself to live a life that feels more balanced, feels more connected, and helping me have a blueprint to learn about myself. And even the times that I have stepped away a little bit from my practice, it's always there when I want to come back to it. And I'm so grateful for that, because it really, truly just creates that safe space within yourself. Because oftentimes this outside world can feel so chaotic and honestly scary and just overwhelming that if you can start to build the skills to create that safe space within yourself through emotional regulation, through understanding yourself, through understanding what happens in your body when these different things are going on, and when you need to slow down, and when you need to check yourself out of whatever situation that you're in, and taking care of yourself. It's such a powerful way to take care of yourself and to learn about yourself and your emotions and everything. So I am completely babbling at this point. I hope that what I have had to say had a little bit of understanding for yourself and you get where I'm coming across. I know it's just a different way of me talking about things. Yeah, if you liked it, let me know. If you didn't, let me know. I want to know. I hope that you have a beautiful day wherever you are. Take it easy. Drink some water. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you be liberated.